Well, hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
Doing really well. How are you
I'm
doing?
good. I'm going to say, because it's true, you're one of my favorite people to talk to. I know it's by Zoom and we're not in the same room, but we do a bit of fun together and a bit of a laugh, I think.
We sure do.
Um, just to say to you viewers and those that I talk to on Zoom elsewhere, please don't be offended if I say she's one of my favorite people, but she is. Hey, now that's put you on a pedestal, so this will better be good, Michelle.
Oh,
Um,
I'm gonna jump off it. So,
yeah. I read a blog of yours recently, a post, which we're going to put a link after this video. Um, and okay, I'll come straight out with it. You didn't use these words, but you kind of said this requirement to forgive is not all it's cracked up to be. You said a little more than that. Come on, give me a summary of the post. If you can
um,
summarize it, then I'm going to question you.
okay, all right, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
All
Uh,
right.
the whole gist of the post was saying, church, we need to stop weaponizing forgiveness. That forgiveness was never meant to be a weapon against those with trauma, with abuse, with ongoing situations or historical situations that they've been violated in. And it's not that forgiveness doesn't have a role, but when we come out and that is our first response to somebody else's suffering is to say, well, if you just forgave them, you wouldn't have that pain. Yeah, it's not that simple. And that can be the whole concept of, well, if you would just forgive and get over it, basically.
Okay.
It can be applied in a way that minimizes, that even shields ongoing abuse
Yeah.
from having any interaction, because it's this guilt trip that gets laid on the survivor, which should never, ever, ever happen under any circumstance.
Can I ask you, how would you okay, let me just leave that on one side. I'm going to want to come back to that. That's very important. But how would you, or would you have a description for forgiveness that goes beyond the simple, this has happened, more or less, forgive, forget, never talk about it, you're in the wrong. So get yourself in the right by saying, okay, doesn't matter, da-di-da-di-da, I've forgiven. I know it's hard to put summary around something, but
Right.
how would you summarize real forgiveness or the process of forgiveness?
I think, again, it's going to depend. This whole post is all wrapped up into an understanding of trauma, and of trauma in religious and church context, as well as historical trauma. And so what can seem like is a simple, oh, someone said something that you didn't like, just forgive them and move on, that should be so simple. If it's not true for everybody, because
Yeah.
you never know what that person's own history of experience of trauma is.
Yeah.
And so when you've got trauma and forgiveness that are dancing in the same space, I think it looks different. Than it's not just this mechanical
Yeah.
thing of I forgive, okay, I have to forgive them 50 times a day.
Mhm.
It's not a box that you tick off. It's,
Right.
I think in so many ways we put the cart before the horse, because when forgiveness happens, it's a letting go. It's not, it, I mean, it doesn't really affect the person that you're forgiving. It's about our own journeys of freedom. And so instead of trying to pry forgiveness out of a hand that's not ready to let it go, it's
Mhm.
like, I think God meets us where we're at, and we walk on a journey of wholeness. And eventually that may be, forgiveness comes in a form of not having it be so directly impactful all the time. It's something that we let go of as there's healing that happens, but that looks different for every single person.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's something that we have any right commoditizing, in a sense,
Right.
of going, oh, well, if you get this much forgiveness, then you're going to get that much healing. We really love formulas, and this is not something that is given to that at all.
Can I flip the other side?
Sure.
Let's say I'm in a situation where I need to forgive, but I'm really, really struggling with it, etc., etc. I'm really going to push you here. So if I carry a resentment, etc., etc., how do you see that fit into the forgiveness or let me call it the healing process?
The healing process. It's a really great question, and I think we don't understand resentment in the church at all. Okay. And we label things as, oh, you're being resentful, or you're being bitter, or you're holding on to your pain. Yeah. I think that for people that have been through especially complex trauma, having a season where they're angry and they're bitter and they're resentful over what happened to them is actually a sign of healing, because most of the time when you walk through and you have a complex trauma history, which I do, but I've also walked with a lot of other people who have different histories with trauma, just in life and in ministry history and in general, that it's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. And to even own the right to be angry that you were wronged, and to be able to name the fact that you were wrong, instead of calling it spiritual abuse or religious trauma, which I get those are very trending topics these days, but they're legitimate ones, and they're not illegitimate. And I think we tend to, especially if it's around a system that maybe we're still invested in, that it's real easy to be like, oh, well, you had church hurt, and we make it a nicer, neater kind of platitude gilded package, if you will. And that can really dismiss people's stories of, oh, well, you just had that happen. You should probably get over that. And you need to be more like Jesus. And we wind up actually villainizing and further damaging the person that's trying to get a measure of closure and healing than not when we do that. We run that risk.
Michele, if you're suggesting part of the healing process is a person has to sit with their anger, their resentment, and you even used the word bitterness, but they're stuff because of what's happened to them. That is quite demanding in terms of, in terms of where they're sitting, who they're sitting with, because I guess you would think church-wise, we don't like that. I think very uncomfortable to have really that in our midst. Yeah.
Like the first time I got mad about something that happened to me, and thinking about it, my first instinct was to apologize. I'm so sorry. I still have some anger about that, which is how you typically hear it phrased. I have some, right? And not that what was done is wrong, and you have every right to be angry about it. Every right. In fact, if you're not angry about it, there may be some unhealthy things going on there. When I had a therapist to be like, oh, I'm so glad you're finally angry about that. And reflect back that anger, which often gets demonized, literally, and feeling the pain, owning the pain, naming the thing that happened to you. A name has power in it. And if sometimes we gaslight and we minimize our own experiences to ourselves, especially in the church, because we're trained to. And we're trained to be, especially in a lot of evangelical circles, and probably even some that aren't, trained to be very submissive to leadership. We're trained, especially as a woman, you're trained to, keep it together. and you better do what's told to you. And so it's easy to turn that into an internal narrative that actually doesn't recognize the harm that you've been through.
No, very good. I know in your post, and obviously it'll be there when people go read it. You've got a link to a pastor making apology.
Yeah.
Well, just summarize what's on that, because I think people should go look at it if they haven't seen it.
And I will put a context warning on that to say, if you've had any instances of sexual assault or sexual abuse, especially in and around a church setting, or really even at all, where you, especially grooming teenagehood, those are all things that can be, this thing can be really triggering to that.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Hear that.
be aware that it's not an easy thing to watch. But if you're okay with that, it's well worth watching. So, but it's basically a video of a pastor getting up and confessing to his congregation that he had had a ongoing affair. And that's how it went. He had a misstep. He had a mistake. He made a mistake. And he's there. I think he was stepping down already, but like they, as part of this whole, restoration process, this is you got to confess your stuff. Well, he didn't exactly frame it in a way that was transparent. And his survivor, the person that was being abused by him, comes forward and said, "This wasn't an affair. You assaulted me repeatedly. I was 16. I was 17." Yeah. And it turned out it was actually, in some places, I don't know what the legalities where they were, but in a lot of parts of the world, that would be considered statutory rape, because it's under an age of consent, and it would anyway because of the power differential and the grooming process that went along with it. Just heinous. And the part that blew my mind is not that happened, as horrible as it is, because unfortunately I've seen more than my fair share of things that are horrible that happen in church circles. And it was that the church showed, like the church as in the people in the building, showed more concern about the pastor who was the abuser than the person that came forward. So the church wanted to surround the person who was the abuser in prayer and cover him and pray for his family. But there was no visible support, at least at that time in that particular video, for the person who stood up with an incredible act of bravery to say what had happened to her.
Yeah. Michele, our time is probably gone. Obviously, we're going to post this video, but a big thanks, because you have got a habit of opening up a few cans for us to have a look at what's inside and putting the lid off. And really appreciate that, because it can be so easy to get all the scriptures lined up on forgiveness, and they're all on your side. And as you say, unfortunately, we use them in a way that Jesus never would have. We weaponize them, and we victimize people and add to the issues that they're trying to walk out of. So I really appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll be back another day to pick up on another theme. So thank you.